It's great to see so many committed leaders gathered here to focus on one of the most defining issues of our time, which is resilience. My name is David Duckenfield. I'm the chair of the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce Resilience Committee, and I'm very proud of the momentum that we've been building here together. Before we get started with the panel, I just want to do a few updates and housekeeping. Reminder to everyone that May 7th, we're hosting our 10th annual Resilience Solutions Summit. Yeah, we made it to a decade, which brings together top thinkers and doers to spotlight innovations that are moving the needle forward. And on May 13th, we'll convene a goals workshop via Zoom to align our committee's vision for the year end. And finally, on June 6th, we hope to see you all at the 2025 Goals Conference, where these ideas will take center stage. All these efforts are built towards a common purpose, which is helping our community adapt, thrive, and lead in the face of changing climate. Now it's my honor to introduce today's panel on extreme heat and the workforce, a topic that couldn't be more urgent or relevant. Leading this discussion is someone who quite literally pioneered the role she's in. Jane Gilbert, the world's first chief heat officer, right here in Miami-Dade County. Jane has helped put our region on the map globally when it comes to climate resilience and has worked tirelessly to ensure our local strategies center people, especially workers, who are the most exposed to rising heat. Joining Jane are a powerhouse group of panelists who bring frontline experience from agriculture, development, safety, and sustainability, exactly the voices we need at this table. So with that, please join me in welcoming Jane Gilbert and our distinguished panel. Thank you.
Good morning, all, and thank you, David. Thank you, Resilience Committee, for all the work that you do. I'm really looking forward to that Resilience Summit on May 7th and for putting a spotlight on extreme heat. I am going to start sharing my screen and give a brief background and then start to introduce the rest of our panel, who are true experts on heat in the workplace today. So just, can everyone see my screen okay and hear me okay? Yeah, okay. So just to level set, heat is the leading weather-related killer in the world, in the United States, and here in Miami-Dade County. It's more than hurricanes or floods or tornadoes or wildfires. And if you look at excess heat-related deaths, it's more than all of those combined. Heat, and we have both high heat and humidity, can lead not only to heat-related illnesses such as heat exhaustion and heat stroke, but to other negative health outcomes. It can trigger a heart attack or pediatric asthma. Excessive heat exposure can result in preterm births and other negative birth outcomes. And certain groups are more either sensitive to high heat or more exposed, outdoor workers being those that are much more exposed. The reason we're here today is that these heat-related illnesses are largely preventable. That we absolutely have agency to do something about this, and that's why we're here today. In Miami, we have a lot of days with a heat index over 90, and that's really when outdoor workers start to have to make sure they're hydrating and taking necessary precautions to make sure they have protections. We also are having increasing days of dangerously high heat of above 100 and above 105, when we really need to start thinking about adjusting work schedules and the kind of work that you're doing. So I mentioned earlier, we have close to our whole heat season is reaching that heat index of 90 almost every day. Historically, we haven't had as many dangerously high heat days, but we're having many more going forward, and I'll show you some data from the last two summers. Last two summers were particularly high heat days. We have had historically about 7 days a year with a heat index at or above 105, but last two summers in 2023, we had heat index at or 105, 42 days, and in 24, 60 days were at or above 105. And that resulted in a doubling of the heat-related emergency department visits. It's not just health impacts, it's economic impacts. The McKinsey, with funding from the Armstrong Resilience Center, did a study on the economic impacts of extreme heat due to labor productivity alone, and they also looked at specific cities. I'll show you that later, but for our Miami metro area, but for the United States, it's estimated that currently those economic impacts are 100 billion a year, and without action on working on heat safety and labor productivity and keeping our temperatures down globally, that could increase very quickly to 200 billion by the end of this decade. We have an extreme heat action plan. I encourage you to go take a look at it. It's three main goals: to inform, prepare, and protect people, to help people stay cool at home affordably, and make sure we have the energy redundancy to keep people cool in the event of widespread power outages, and then finally to reduce our urban heat islands through urban tree canopy, cool surfaces, and other areas. Why do we focus on workers? We focus on workers because we have over 300,000 people who are exposed to heat outdoors every day here in Miami-Dade County, and they are the most likely demographic to have a heat-related illnesses. Agricultural workers, according to research, can be up to 35 times more likely, and construction anywhere from 11 to 14 times more likely. And it can also reduce productivity and increase traumatic injuries. It has additional costs of healthcare and workman's comp claims. In that study that McKinsey, Vivid Economics, and Armstrong did, there's the link there. The estimate here in the Miami metro area is $10 billion a year, due to double by mid-century to $20 billion a year. 10 billion, that's like getting a Cat 3 hurricane every year in terms of economic impact to our region. Why we're here today, there's also some really positive things that simple steps any business can take, can protect their workers, protect their productivity, and reduce healthcare and workman's comp claims. We know this from research that you can continue productivity with basic strategies of hydration and cool rest breaks. That by moving work shifts, you can also reduce heat stress costs, and that just training can be a huge impact on that. You'll learn more of the specifics, but basic tenets of a good heat safety plan. First, you want to assess what kind of risk your workers are under. The county has a countywide heat illness prevention program, but every department has to assess each of our different workers in terms of what kind of PPE they have to wear, their level of exertion, what the length of time they're exposed, and then come up with mitigation plans related to that. You want to make sure both frontline staff and their supervisors are all trained. Allow for acclimatization. This was one of the most shocking things I learned when I started this work, is that 70% of heat incidents on the job happen in the first week of a person's work. 70% of our heat-related illnesses happen in the first week. If you can just slowly introduce over a week or 2 weeks, then you can avoid those costs. You should define access to cool water and rest breaks, and make sure you know how to handle when heat stress incidences come up. Want to announce, very excited, partnership we just launched yesterday with the Miami Foundation for small businesses, any business with less than 50 employees, and then also our farm licensed farm contract laborers, even if they do have over 50, can access a mini grant to purchase insulated water kegs, temporary shade structures, reusable water bottles, cooling towels, whatever their PPE needs are to protect their workers. It's a very simple application. Please share it with those businesses that you know that may benefit from that. The application deadline is May 9th. We'll make sure these slides are available so you have these links. These are more resources here. I want to keep moving on because our next speaker is, one second, is Ariana Cabrera de Ona. She is the General Counsel and Chief People Officer for Costa Farms. And hold on one second. I had my whole bio for you, but I can't access it right now. But I'm going to say what I remember about Ariana, which she is just, I first learned about Costa Farms leading work through the Florida Chamber, who you're going to hear from later, and from Caesar, who spoke at a heat webinar they did, and they really did leading work. And then I went down to visit Costa Farms last fall and saw the great work that they're doing, really leading work in protecting their workers. Ariana is comes with an amazing educational pedigree, but really dynamic in engaging her workforce. She is responsible for legal compliance and government affairs, but also for making Costa Farms a place that all their workers are proud to work at and engage. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Ariana, and let me know as you want to progress.
Thank you, Jane. That intro was better than the bio I wrote anyway, so I appreciate that. Thank you for putting this together, David, and everybody else who was involved with this. I'm honored actually to be able to be here. Thank you for inviting me to be able to share the work that we do at Costa Farms, which we call, our campaign is around the name Beat the Heat. That's what we just called it. So if you want to go ahead, we'll talk about the four, I don't know if I can do that. Okay. So basically, foundation of our heat safety program is around creating a policy, ensure that we have a lot of training, education, reinforce all of those things, everything that we teach in training, everything that we have in our policy, and then ensure that we have the right resources in place. So with those four foundations, I'll go in depth into each of them. I know my time is short, so I'm not gonna, I'll go through it in the details rather than going through this. You want to go to the next slide? So starting with a policy, and our policy has evolved, and I know that, Jane, that was one of the questions that you asked, how have we evolved over time? And so, from my perspective, from a compliance perspective, I think it's really important every 3 years or so to evaluate your policy. And so we've revamped this based on the latest guidance from OSHA, actually took the proposed rules from OSHA that are out there right now, and then, just made sure that we were hitting all of the bullet points. So that's how we enhanced our policy most recently. Before that, obviously, most of those things were already in place, but I would advise anybody that's looking to put a policy in place to just take that guidance and go through it point by point. So we focus on 4 key areas in our policy, and that's training team members and supervisors on strategies and how to recognize and report signs and symptoms of heat-related illnesses. One of the really important things, obviously, supervisors need to be really good at this. They need to be well educated on this, but we also feel that every team member on our farm needs to be able to identify who knows your body better than you, right? So for every person to be very well educated to recognize signs and symptoms. We also focus on monitoring the weather and workplace conditions and assessing heat hazards on a daily basis. We then, and we know that there are lots of those days, once those heat days and then high heat days are in, we implement specific strategies to reduce heat stress. And then finally, planning for heat-related medical emergencies. We have to have protocols in place. It's really important that everybody know what to do, especially in agriculture. Something as simple as many of our farms don't have addresses attached to them. And so ensuring that every person on the farm knows to go to the front of the farm, have somebody stationed at the road to flag down EMS, to flag down emergency services, to get them to the people is really important. Those are just things that we've learned over the years. It's things you can't take for granted. It's those little details. You want to go to the next slide, please? On the training side, education and training is key. And I put on here a few of the posters and the training tools that we use, but it's important to tailor them to people's roles, to their skill level, and also to language. So we do train in English, Spanish, and in Creole. And we have training that applies to supervisors, and then we have separate training that we can give to more of our labor workers. And we focus on being able to identify and mitigate signs and symptoms of heat illness, training on first aid. We have an in-house nurse who focuses on this through our 5-minute huddles, which I'll talk about in a minute. And so, she goes around and actually speaks in person to every person on our farm on different topics, on the importance of hydration, on the importance of what you do over the weekend and what you drink and eat over the weekend to ensure that your body's not dehydrated. So how to identify, the bottom right there is how to identify what your urine looks like, and when things might be dangerous. So these are just some examples. You want to go to the next slide, please? And then reinforcement. It has to be constant, especially during heat months. We don't only do this during heat months, but during heat months, we certainly know that we have to be much more deliberate. Our Beat the Heat campaign, our goal was to make it impossible for anyone to miss so that everybody understood like the importance of hydration, the importance of taking the breaks when they needed. We do an annual survey. And during our annual survey, which was conducted in September, the number one most positive response we got on the survey was, do you understand and are you told about the importance of hydrating and resting? We had like a 96% positivity rate. So that to me meant like our campaign worked when 96% of our people can say, yes, I do understand the importance of this. So we use posters, we use different size posters, we use information that's easy to take in, multiple languages, easy to interpret pictures. Again, make sure that the training is tailored to the audience. And then we run through a program we call CPS, our cost of production system, 290 plus daily 5-minute huddles, where these things are reinforced. Where on a daily basis, we talk about what the weather conditions are going to be that day and what our plan is, whether we're planning to start work earlier the coming week, whether we're going to use conveyors that day. So this is how we reinforce the message. Next slide, please. And then resources. We're very lucky at Costa Farms that we have a safety team that spearheads our efforts, well-trained, accessible. We have an HR team, which we call our people team, reinforcing our policies, taking actions when gaps are identified. And look, whoops, one more, go back, please. No, back. We went forward. There we go. So I recognize that not everybody has a company large enough, right, to staff a safety team and a people team, but it is easy enough to at least have a few people on your team that are well versed in this, right? That is something that they focus on. There are so many resources out there, and it's just a matter of ensuring that somebody has to focus on your farm or at your work site. Obviously, having water always available and accessible, cooling cloths, hats, Gatorade, popsicles we use, ice. You mentioned you mentioned something about, you know, the tools that you can use to make things easier. We have conveyors that stretch across our farms now, you know, half-mile long at a time, maybe even more, but, you know, making it so that our people aren't moving our products, the conveyors are, and then they can do their job without as much, let's call it motion. So, and then of course, adequate break areas. Those are something that we've invested a lot of money over the past 5 to 10 years in air-conditioned break areas, but also making sure that break areas are close to our people. So those are definitely investments that pay off. Jane, as you pointed out, there are very real economic repercussions, right, to not working smart when it comes to heat. So those are investments that pay off. And then next slide. So evolution, you know, the evolution has been formalization of practices into a policy. I can't say how important it is to ensure that you have a policy. Even if you're doing all the right things, make sure that you put it down on paper. And what we do is that we get all of our leaders in a room and we get buy-in, and we ensure, like, hey, everybody's stacked hands on this and we're all going to be doing this. And by getting that buy-in from our leaders, I know that that's trickling down, right? And that it's a focus and important to everybody in the company. Standardization across all farms to ensure consistency, I think, is, again, for our organization, is very important, because we do have farms in different locations and potentially things that have evolved over time differently. But I think that standardization is very important, because we really have one way of working the right way. And then, you know, there's no confusion about what we should or shouldn't be doing during high heat time. We ensure accountability, so that's, you know, everybody understands that it is their responsibility to make sure that our people are safe every day. Socialization of our policies through intentional campaign. Again, we had a lot of people saying, yeah, we've been doing this, we do the right thing. But as we've evolved, we've recognized that it's really important to make sure that we are getting the word out every day to everybody out there, right? That everybody understands what we're doing. We've added people resources over the time, for sure, both on the people team and on the safety team. And then we've implemented technology to back up what we're doing, not just tools like conveyors, but also something that Caesar's going to be talking about in a minute. And also, I put this poster here because this is, you know, an example of using technology, QR codes, having these available so that people can use their phones and take a look at different resources, right? If they're not up on a bulletin board, they can take it home with them on their phone and take a look at it there. So that's it. That's what we're doing here at Costa Farms.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ariana. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Cesar Martinez Jr., who is the environmental health and safety lead for Costa Farms, and has been with them since, I believe, 2019. And prior to that was leading in construction of agricultural facilities in Florida and in many places, and also has an illustrious military career. So Cesar, with that, I'll turn it over to you.
Fantastic. Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Jane, and thank you, committee, you know, for allowing Ariana and I to take a few minutes and just share with you all what we're doing at Costa Farms, because it is something we're very proud of. So I can make up a little time here. Why don't you go to the next slide, Jane? We'll jump right in. Yeah, so why is it important to us? So, you know, when we've looked at heat, I mean, you know, obviously the second bullet is key to us, right? Because heat and humidity is one of our product's key inputs. It's not going anywhere. You can't grow plants without it. So instead of trying to fight the working environment, you know, we really try to take an outside look at, hey, how can we mold the environment to do with what the first bullet is, which is ensure that our most valued resource is safe and healthy. Okay. Because at the end of the day, without our people, we're not doing anything. So keeping our people safe and healthy and enjoying what they're doing, even though that's tough in August in Florida, is paramount to us. So, and then the last slide, the last bullet there, digging deeper, what's next, always looking to improve. And I'll share a couple of things here in a little bit. So next slide, Jane. So the short and skinny of it is about a year ago, I attended a function in Orlando, hosted by the Chamber. I was already thinking about how do we tackle heat from a 1,000-foot view, you know, and look at it from a very small granular level. Okay. You know, right now we've all got weather apps on our phone, whether it's a WeatherBug, National Weather Service, or whatever. But if you've ever really looked at those apps, okay, they're generally giving you information that could be from a weather station. I've seen them 30 or 40 miles from where I was located. Okay, the closest one. I know in Miami it's a little bit different, but I actually live in Central Florida in the country. And I mean, the closest one is 20 or 30 miles away. So is it really a true representation about what I am feeling, you know, where I'm currently at right now? Well, fortunately, I just happened to go to this thing hosted by the Chamber in Orlando, and Greg Hale, the Chief Safety Officer for Disney, gave a presentation on some of the initiatives that Disney is doing with regards to heat. The light bulb went off. I was able to have dinner with Greg that evening, and next thing you know, a great collaboration with Disney was kicked off between Costa and them, and Costa Heat Shield started getting born an idea, and then it was born in reality, as I'll share in a second. Next slide, Jane. Well, that's not going to load up, but I was trying to back up one. I think it is. Yeah, back up one. The other way. Well, I guess it's not going to load up Google Earth, but this was just showing you a representation of our farthest northern point to our farthest southern point in Miami, in Homestead. Okay. So you can see it's 11 miles, almost 11 miles from our northern facility to our most southern facility. And then, you know, about 8 miles, you know, on the other line there. So next slide. Okay. So three key inputs for us, right? We have full sun, we have shade, and we have poly houses, greenhouses, right? Which, you know, is a plastic for those that may not be aware of it. Okay. So trying to solve for all three of those. Okay. We started looking at, you know, heat index, wet bulb, different things. And we settled on wet bulb. Okay. That we wanted to measure wet bulb. Fortunately, one thing that we have plenty of is we have thousands of sensors in these locations now currently, measuring these things for our growing operations, whether that's relative humidity, whether that's heat, you name it. We already have them out there because we use them in our recipes, right? For growing, for making decisions on growing our product. So instead of spending a bunch of money, we said, hey, why don't we use the sensors we have? Why don't we start comparing them against heat index, against wet bulb, and then let's come up with a solution where we can start looking at things at a microclimate level and make decisions based upon the actual farm versus that spread of 20 or 30 miles that, you know, might be happening depending upon where your app is showing. And we obviously use a little bit of open source as well. And you can see the picture down at the bottom is where we started measuring some of these inputs. So next slide, Jane. Yeah, so this is just an example, okay, of our Costa Color facility, several hundred acres, a very large facility. The red dots are representing, you know, not actual, but, you know, kind of the different sensors that are already there for our growing. So we started picking those up. We started measuring. We started doing comparisons, wet bulb, heat index, you know, versus open source. And we finally decided on wet bulb. And the reason we decided on wet bulb is because wet bulb, unlike heat index, which is basically heat and humidity, wet bulb uses everything. Solar radiance, wind, cloud cover, you name it, right? And to me, I'm in the military, right? And that's all I knew for 31 years was wet bulb, okay? And to me, that was a true representation about the field temperature on our people in the three different environments that we solve for, which is shade, again, poly, and sun. So, you know, we said, hey, let's create an alert system now that's based upon site specific at the microclimate level instead of doing this broad, you know, hey, everybody in South Florida now we're at a wet bulb of 90 degrees, when actually the farm in the north might be at 87 and the farm in the south might be at, you know, 92, which I know is not big, but when you start looking at everything, including our policy and how we structure triggers, it can be a big thing. So So that's what we did. So next slide. And this is just showing you kind of what, it's an app. I mean, I've got some good people that are a lot smarter than I am with IT stuff, where we actually have a control panel measured. And then the next slide. And this is what the alerts look like. This is just an example from last summer when we were doing some of the piloting. So don't pay any attention to the 85 degrees. It was more about getting the alert system. So right now, well, we are actually executing the rollout now, okay, in one of our locations, and we're going to slowly roll this out across the farms in South Florida, and then eventually move north, right? We've got locations all the way up to Virginia, but obviously our focus is on our Florida farms right now because that's where our largest exposure is. But what is happening is we are going to have an alert system go out if I'm working at Costa Color, okay? And the sensors are telling me that the temperature is X at Costa Color, then everybody that is a part of that alert system that works at Costa Color will get a notification saying, hey, we have met a wet bulb of X. And then according to our policy, if it meets that X, then obviously we have triggers set up to change our work environment or whatever the case may be, right? More breaks, more rest. So that's kind of it in a real quick summary about what we're doing. And I will say, Jane, that, you said about in your slide presentation about efficiencies of work or lost productivity. That is what's coming next. When I put the first slide up about digging deeper, I'm already in talks with Disney about collaborating on some pilot programs. And I'm very curious to see the difference between Monday, what our efficiencies look like, and Friday, what our efficient looks like in those heat months, right? Because I think we may be losing some productivity there. Maybe we're just not measuring it right, but that is what's next. Once we get this implemented and feel very positive about where it's going, is start looking at the physiology side of it. So I hope that was quick enough, but that's all I got, Jane.
No, that's awesome. And wet bulb globe temperature is what the military, what athletes use. It is a better, not everyone has access to it. 85, 86, that's pretty high for wet bulb globe temperature, actually. It's a different kind of measurement, and that can be tricky for people. So thank you, Cesar. And now it is, oh, I'm going to go back because we're going to now have, go back. I'm going to stop sharing. We're going to now invite Nelson Stabile up to speak. Nelson, thank you for joining us today. Nelson is a co-founder and principal for Integra Investments and serves as the president of the Builders Association of South Florida, which is a chapter of the Florida equivalent and the national equivalent. But anyway, Nelson is a leader in our community. I'm so grateful for all he does here, including having been the lead sponsor for our Pet-Adopt-a-thon or whatever it was called this last weekend where he saw our mayor. So thank you, Nelson.
Well, thank you so much, Jane. Can everybody hear me okay? Thank you, Jane. Thank you, David, for putting this panel together. Unfortunately, I'm going to disappoint the audience by not having as fancy and nice of a presentation as Ariana and Cesar had, showing all of the great work that they're doing. But again, compliments, congratulations on the amazing job you guys have been doing on this front, because it is very critical for all of our workers, right, across all industries. So lots of great things to take away from, especially being able to at some point in construction implement technology like the one Cesar was mentioning, right, would be such a dream of having folks get alerted on changes in climate conditions during the day that could expose them even further. So great job there. So my objective here today, as Jane mentioned, I'm Nelson Stabile from Integra Investments. We are a developer covering the entire state of Florida, but predominantly the South Florida region. We build projects from mixed use developments all the way, residential projects. But one that's close to our heart is our efforts in affordable and workforce housing, right? So it's an honor to serve our community in that front. And occasionally we do partner up with the county on pet adoption events like we did this weekend. So that was a lot of fun. But my objective is to give you just a general overview of what's taking place in the construction industry, right? I think Costa Farms gave great example of everything that's taking place in the agricultural industry. So I'll just give an overview. The industry as a whole, as we all know, is regulated by OSHA. So just as Ariana mentioned, last year, I believe in August, OSHA issued a notice of proposed rulemaking to bring in more well-defined rules and guidelines, right, to sort of generally provide guardrails as to what the members of the construction industry should be implementing on their projects, on their job sites, in order to be able to make sure that the workers are as safe as they possibly can, right? We here at the Builders Association, we are the local chapter of the Florida Home Builders Association, which is the state chapter of the National Association of Home Builders. And through the National Association of Home Builders, there was a lot of interaction with OSHA, with members of the National Association of Home Builders. Myself, I participated in a couple of panels to provide some feedback as to conditions that happen in different workplace settings, right? Because the challenge with our industry as a whole is that we do have a very wide variety of different construction types and even geography, right? Workers that are accustomed to working in Colorado, should they move to Florida, right? I mean, they're going to have a very, very different set of circumstances. In the winter, they're dealing with snow, which is a whole different set of risks. But in their summers, they're never exposed to, the types of heat indexes or temperatures that we are accustomed to down here in South Florida. So, that has been in the discussions with OSHA from our perspective, the biggest challenge of crafting rules, regulations, guidelines, recommendations that are also, flexible enough to be able to account for the different types of conditions, both geographically as well as the different conditions that, working in a single family home is one thing, working on a high rise, it's very different, right? As an example. So that's, in general, some of the considerations that we have to take when we're setting in place our best practices for heat illness prevention. But overall, the industry has also been very much behind because there's a lack, right? There's a lack of consistent educational material, what to do, right? Do we set in place practices based on temperature? Do we set in place practices based on heat index, right? Like what's right, what's wrong? So we have been also supportive of having more well-defined guidelines. Again, hopefully that ultimately they take into account, all of the different conditions that we have to deal with in different job sites. As Jane mentioned, right, the vast majority of the, whether it's a illness incidence or unfortunately a fatality, really happens in the first week of workers working. So, of course, for us, one of the biggest things that we promote is, giving the workers the proper acclimatization, right? Conditions so that they're not, they can little by little, whether it's over the course of 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, right? Really get acclimated to that work if they haven't been working in that same condition, in the past. So another interesting fact that has, that impacts our industry, and then I'm going to get into things that we're effectively, doing on the day-to-day, is the fact that there has been a huge shift of basically the worker-employer, right, interaction or coexistence in our industry as a whole. In 1960, only 30% of the workforce was subcontracted, right, which meant that 70% of the workforce was directly hired by whether it was a builder, right, a general contractor, but somebody or some company that should have the proper training capabilities and right, and the ability to direct those workers in a more effective and efficient manner, so that those safety practices and this applies actually very broadly, right? Heat illness prevention is one aspect of what we deal with, but there's also the largest cause, 1/3 of all fatalities in construction, unfortunately, happens from fall, right? So if you walk into any job site, the biggest focus that we have on an ongoing basis every single day, especially when you're working with high-rise construction, is fall protection, right? Because again, that's 1/3 of all fatalities in construction. You know, the challenge has been that in 1960, only 30% was subcontracted, right? So you could technically, you know, properly direct 70% of the workforce. Well, because of just different things, the requirement for specialty trades or specialization, right, in work. So the same guy that's doing the roofing is not necessarily today the same person that is installing tile. So because of the need for specialization, also the cost of labor, right? Companies have gravitated towards subcontracting more work. So today, 75% of the work, right, in pretty much any job site is subcontracted, right? Which means that so, you know, and I'm sure Ariana and Cesar will agree to this, it's a lot easier for you to train the personnel when they're your own personnel, right? When you're simply having somebody come to your job site, perform a function, then move on the next day to another job site, it becomes a little bit more challenging. So those are just things that, you know, we're faced with on our day-to-day. And lastly, you know, 80% of all builders in the country are companies that build 25 residential units or less a year and have 6 or less employees, right? Again, another circumstance that we have to basically understand, pay attention to, because to a great extent, these are small companies that may not necessarily have all of the resources that us, you know, medium and larger size companies have at our availability to be able to properly train and you know, and keep our workers safe. I feel like there's two worlds, right? So when you're focusing on small size projects or small size companies, it's you know, again, education, we got to figure out more creative ways to be able to tap into and get access to that workforce and those employers, because again, it's a lot harder. But when you're working with medium and large size companies and medium and large size projects, I feel like the industry as a whole is in a much better place. Because generally, in those sort of circumstances, not only do you have a confined workspace, right? You have a job site with that has, you know, fencing that sort of defines which workers are in there, which workers are not, etc. So you can control access. And for example, in all of our sites, and I consider ourselves to be a medium-sized company, we don't allow one worker in the job site unless they have gone through a full safety training program, right? And we conduct the safety training programs once a week. In our case, again, so some of the large companies in our market, you probably have heard of names such as, you know, Coastal Construction, Moss Construction, all great builders, you know, Turner, folks that are even doing work for the county, right? All of those companies, for the most part, have their own internal safety responsible superintendent that is, you know, in our case, even in our case, we have all of our superintendents are 40-hour OSHA certified, right? So they've gone through and certifications and recertifications to make sure that they know everything that they need to cover. But the large companies have dedicated personnel, full-time, right? Going around job sites, making sure that they're putting the training in place. They're certifying each employee that makes their way into those job sites of all things, including heat, illness prevention, right? So that's great. Companies that are medium-sized like ourselves, we actually hire an outside, you know, safety consultant that comes in, you know, and again, they come in once a week to provide the safety trainings. And especially as we get into the summer, you know, portion of the year, there's a huge emphasis and focus on, you know, heat illness prevention. So medium and large size job sites as well, I probably would say that, you know, 99% of them or most of them all have potable water, right out of the gate. So the things that you do as you're getting a job site going is you secure temporary electricity, right? So that you can actually run your tools, et cetera, et cetera. But you also run a temporary meter so that you can get, you know, potable water into the project to have that available for the workers working in there. And as projects come out of the ground, the first thing the general contractors typically do is select a safe and covered area, right, for folks to be able to come and have rest breaks. And usually that's also the same location where they will stop to have their lunch and mid-afternoon, right, snack breaks throughout the day. So, that's common practice, right? We actually try to have, in most of our jobs, an ice machine, right? So that folks can have no excuse to say, oh, I just didn't have access to water and cool water, right? So we have their big ice machine, right? The potable water available to all of them. And of course, because we manage the jobs, we have stacks and stacks. I mean, we just buy tons of water to have bottles, right? Because some folks work in different parts of the project where they may not have quick and easy access to these specific locations where the ice machines are, et cetera. So we make that available. But then the other thing that is common practice in medium and large size construction sites are what we call the toolbox talks, right? So every single morning crews get together, and usually the superintendents who are OSHA trained, they will go through every single different condition that's out there in the project based on both physically where the job is or based on climate, right? Whether it's going to be a very heavy rainy day or there's a lot of wind, right? And wind can pose other different types of risks, right? If we're working on a swing stage, right, or cranes, right, wind is a factor that needs to be considered also just as much as heat. So heat is a big part of the conversation. Wind, rain, all of the climate conditions. In our job sites in particular, we post up every single day, first thing in the morning, what that heat index is supposed to be in a very prominent location in the construction trailer, right? Because usually what happens is as workers come into job sites, they'll go check in either with their supervisor or, our supervisory crew at the construction trailer so that they can see what that heat index is going to be like. And our superintendents are all very well trained on making sure that the folks are wearing the right clothing, right? From safety shoes, with steel toes, all the boots, all the way to, the hats, long sleeve shirts, right? In the beginning of projects, we also made it a common practice to distribute long sleeve shirts with UV protection to all of them in hopes that they kind of keep using that same gear, over and over throughout the duration of the project. So there's a lot of good things that are set in place, again, by especially the medium and large size projects. Fortunately, at least in our company, we've had 16 years of corporate history and existence without ever having had one incident of heat illness on a job site, and no major accidents even beyond that. So we've been very fortunate in that perspective. But the industry as a whole, again, I feel like, huge emphasis on education, and not to say that we can't do better, right? I feel like I liked some of the ideas that I saw from Ariana. We're going to have to, fortunately, we're good friends, so I'm sure she'll be able to share all of the QR code and the things that you're doing, because I think that those things can be awesome and easily to implement in our industry as well. The challenge, I think, becomes a little bit more when you're dealing with small scale projects and, sometimes job sites where you have one or two workers working by themselves, right? Because that's what's going on that day, and you don't have really the ability to have proper supervisory folks, out there. But, in general, I feel like we're, that's sort of the state of the union, if you will, on the construction industry. Lastly, a few things that I believe are going to help. Right, there's a huge evolution within construction, which is, a trend into building parts of projects in off-site facilities. Right here in South Florida, we're still not, as an example, in last December, I was in Philadelphia. I went to, that area to meet with 3 off-site construction companies that have basically factory settings, right, industrial warehouse settings, where they build a lot of their components and they bring that already ready to be incorporated into the job sites as we know it. But it takes a lot of the labor off the construction sites, which are environments which is a lot more challenging for you to have, the good practices and good standards in place, just because of the nature of, being a construction site, et cetera. But that's happening, right? And I think here in South Florida, we're still a little bit behind. A lot has to do with our building code and some of the things that happen locally here. But I feel like that's a trend, right? Overall, industry-wide, that's going to make it better. Because again, if you have folks in a controlled environment, right, a factory setting, the more of that labor force that works in that environment, it's a lot easier for you to then provide for a cooled, ambiance, et cetera, et cetera. And lastly, there's some good technology that also is being starting to be widely used, especially by large companies, that I feel like could help in disseminating the proper educational materials and even alerts, right? Like the example that Ariana and Cesar gave us here today. So, in general, that sorry I didn't have a beautiful PowerPoint presentation, but that's the state of the union on the construction side.
It's very helpful, and hopefully Builders Association of South Florida can help get the word out to the small
Yes.
builders of that grant opportunity. That would be really great. Very, very helpful. Thank you, Nelson. And now it is my pleasure to introduce to you Katie Uter, who is the COO and CFO of the Florida Chamber and the president of the Florida Chamber's Leadership Cabinet on Safety, Health, and Sustainability. She created this leadership cabinet really to help drive results and deliver results for their members in areas that they were most concerned about, and I think has been exceptionally successful at that. We've had a few calls and I've participated in some of their events, and it's really why I've invited Katie to join us today, because I think she's doing some great work. So thank you, Katie.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jane, David, and Christina for having me today, and look forward to continuing to work together to eliminate all heat illness and injury in the state of Florida. So thank you for all the work that you are doing on resiliency and heat down in South Florida. But just as a starting point, as a general overview, so the Florida Chamber of Commerce launched about 5 years ago now, the Florida Chamber Leadership Cabinet on Safety, Health, and Sustainability, as part of our strategic plan on addressing safety, health, and sustainability through the private sector. So our Safety Council really focuses on tactical safety training, tactical awareness, OSHA, heat safety, heat training, heat prevention. Our Health Council focuses on long-term systemic issues that if we don't start addressing, we won't be able to train our way out of. So last May, Cesar spoke to our leadership conference that we held last May. I was at that leadership conference. We also, in addition to a lot on heat awareness, launched the nation's first business-led mental health report with Michael Phelps. So we are working on opioids, overdoses, mental health, all of those long-term systemic health issues that need to be addressed that we will eventually not be able to train our way out of because of. And then we have our Sustainability Council that is focused on cleaner air, cleaner land, and cleaner water. And that is led by Aaron Black, Coca-Cola Florida, from our board. So this entire cabinet is led by 20 individuals that I would say are the global leaders on safety, health, and sustainability. Each one of our councils are chaired by a board member. We do have bi-monthly calls throughout the business community for each one of these councils on a bi-monthly basis. Our chair is John Trevathan, Chief Procurement Officer of Guidewell, Florida Blue, currently. So Cesar had mentioned Greg Hale is one of our board members, very fortunate to have him. Advent Health, the Chief Safety Officer for Advent Health, who's been very engaged in our heat as well, former head of OSHA, involved in this group as well. So very fortunate to have them. But Jane, if you could go to the next slide. Next slide. I know we're running a little short on time, but if I'm going too fast or if anybody has any follow-up, I welcome any sort of follow-up conversations afterwards, of course. So I'm not going to go into much depth on this. You hear Ariana spoke to this, Nelson spoke to this, but this really speaks to the proposed standards that were put out through OSHA. Last July is when they were proposed. They were published in the Federal Registry later that fall. And so currently working on, but this has been a large part of our work. And the Florida Chamber of Commerce, I think, is very uniquely positioned between what we're doing on the private sector and private organizations on solutions, programs, education, as well as working with the public sector on policy and standards for which these heat standards are being pushed through. If you go to the next slide, Jane. this, I just wanted to share when Ariana shared some of her policies and procedures and taking into account a lot of these proposed rules. These are really the categories of what were in those proposed heat safety rules that were required. So I'm going to go a little bit through our journey, but through some of our work with our heat committee that was formed, Representative Webster actually used our data, our research, and our recommendations from the Florida Chamber Heat Committee in his letter to the U.S. Department of Labor Secretary, and his viewpoint that sort of the proposed rule one size fits all approach to addressing heat for indoor and outdoor settings were sort of unjustly impact, especially the agriculture community. So very excited to see this work, certainly continue to move forward, but we certainly balance between the public side and the policy side, as well as the private sector side on programming and solutions and data and research. Next slide. So this is a little bit of our journey. And so when a lot of our heat, we've been working on heat since our safety council was launched. So we've been doing heat stress training and heat prevention training through our training division that we have, really since for the last 5 years. As this has become more of a predominant issue, of course, in the state of Florida, and the great work that Jane is doing, and more that we've sort of brought this to the forefront, this is where we started running heat stress pilot programs. Greg Hale and the Disney Global SyncLink team worked with us on this, and we put heat pilot programs out throughout the private sector in the state of Florida. So Florida Power and Light is an example, Coca-Cola Florida, were some of the companies that we worked with on this heat stress pilot program. And what we were able to do is do microclimate stations that allowed us to collect data over an entire year, throughout the entire year, on what was heat specific data and data collections at different points and in different regions throughout Florida. All of these sort of pilots, data collection, then went into the heat committee. They're a big part of this work on sort of analyzing the data, using that sort of for best practices. Went further into data collection and analysis. We worked with our large healthcare systems here in Florida to really even look at, Jane, you spoke to ER visits, how much is coming in that are work comp related versus general, right? So where is, a lot of our heat illness coming in through our ERs? Is it a work comp, or is this coming through, individuals that are out in the heat, landscaping and stuff like that? That's when we went into review proposed policies and regulations on where OSHA was coming out. We provide recommendations back behind our data, our research, our microclimate stations testing, and then how those various rules apply to various industries. How does it apply to construction? Nelson spoke to the differences between the mid and large side construction versus the small construction, agriculture, manufacturing, and sort of across our industries, because how do we help the private sector here in Florida thrive to become the 10th largest economy in the world, while at the same time eliminating heat illness and heat injury in the state of Florida? And that is sort of our ultimate outcome. And that's where the Florida Chamber sort of thrives, in the middle of that space. So in addition to the data collection analysis, I've gone up to the University of Ottawa. I've met with the chief scientist up there, who has done sort of the global research on heat. It's the world's only sort of I'm not going to say the word right, but they have a lot of sort of chambers up there that they do a lot of the heat testing and humidity testing. I recently took some CEOs over to the UAE 2 weeks ago, which has a very hot climate as well. Somewhat comparable to the state of Florida. We were able to meet with the Minister of AI and some of their private sector companies over there, talked a lot about heat. What are those things that we can bring back to Florida and apply across all industries, but bringing this knowledge and this brain trust from what the large sector is doing all the way down to the small businesses to help them thrive and have access to this information and knowledge at the same time. Next slide. So this really built out our 3 different areas that we sort of continue to evolve and grow. So we do have businesses on the committee. That is our heat committee. It sits underneath the safety council that is chaired with the Disney Global SyncLink team. We're using technology and partnerships on bringing solutions to the marketplace, providing expertise, standards, and best practices that are being shared, and then continue to grow the heat committee. And this is where we're bringing together those small businesses and learning from the best technologies, best partnerships of what's being done out there to help make sure every organization in the state of Florida has access to the same knowledge, the same information to protect their workers. Next slide. So this is our HEAT dashboard that we have grown through the HEAT committee. We have a direct link to the National Weather Service, our trainings and business tools. This is where we're collecting best practices. Looking forward to working with Jane Acosta Farms on continuing to build out best practices and white papers on things and policies and procedures of things that are working in Florida, and most importantly, things that are not working. Right. So sometimes it's most important about what things have been tried that haven't worked as is about the things that have been working. Next slide. And so this is a part of our data and our research, and Cesar sort of spoke to it on these microclimate stations. So we have two hardware solutions. I'm sharing Tempest here. This is a smaller sort of microclimate station. I believe Cesar, his picture showed the larger sort of Heat Guardian, which is much more of an integrated sort of system that tends to be a much larger investment for some of our mid to small sized companies to integrate on heat and to be able to access that microclimate data. You know, Tempest is a great solution. So we work both with the Heat Guardian side of this as well as the Tempest side of this to really get that microsite climate stations that really then integrate into the app to get that data. So we're not looking at sort of that blanket weather app or weather bug and that sort of thing. Next slide. And so here's just some of the QR code is there. Here's a lot of what we're working on. I shared a lot of the policy work that we're doing in this space, some of our research and our data, and then we drive that all the way down to our prevention toolkits, our custom heat safety training, our mobile apps, education and training, and more. So Nelson spoke a lot about education. I couldn't agree more. I think it's about the right education, the right awareness. I think there's a lot of things that we can do around heat that people aren't aware of, but are very simple, and things that when you say them are very logical, but are not front of mind for people when you're talking about heat. So that is a lot of the work that we're doing. Next slide. So a lot of, so what we're doing at our conference this year, and Cesar spoke, he attended our conference last May, but we are doing, Damon John is our keynote this year. But what we're doing directly after our keynote is we are doing a pitch tank. And this isn't meant to be a product pitch tank, but what we're doing is bringing individuals to conference that are going to be pitching Damon John, Matt Higgins, and some other C-suites on how do you get buy-in in the boardroom and on leadership, on investments in safety, health, and sustainability. So that always seems to be a little bit of the gap in our safety community. Is how do we get the buy-in, the investments, and pitching it into leadership and ROI on making those investments on the microclimate stations, on mental health, on sustainability. And so this is going to be a large part of our conference. After we do our pitch tank, instead of doing our breakout sessions, we're actually going to do competitive cohorts with military victory strategies. So fighter pilots, Navy SEALs, that are actually going to be breaking all of our conference attendees into cohorts. And we are actually going to help people understand how to get execution through teams. So Ariana, a lot of what you talked about, Cesar, a lot of what you talked about is about human behavior and change. And so how do we take theory of what we're talking about, but how do we get people to internalize this and to be able to execute through on it? And so that's what we're going to be arming our safety, health, and sustainability professionals with at our conference this year. And so we'll be running that for a day and a half. At the end, we're going to do a Top Gun Fighter debrief on what worked, the communication, the buy-in, and the execution side of this. And I did have a slide, sorry, Jane, it must not have gotten included, but what I am most excited about, I've actually worked with the Disney team on this, is we are launching a safety, health, and sustainability community platform that will be an app and an online platform. So all of our historical breakout speakers, will be housed in a learning library on this app. And so Greg Hale has done something on heat once again this year, but this will, if you are attending conference, you will have access to this online platform. And this is meant to be an ongoing living community is the best way to say it. So this is how we are going to try to reach everybody throughout Florida to give them the knowledge, the education, and arm them with this information. We can hold office hours. We can put information out on heat. We can be sharing these things in real time with all of our safety, health, and sustainability professionals, but most importantly, they can interact with each other. They can ask questions, they can engage with each other, they can ask how to solve challenges together, what has worked, and this is going to be our living community here in the state of Florida for safety, health, and sustainability professionals to connect, to help, and sort of be all in on this together and to create this movement. So very excited to launch that community in Florida. Jane, a lot of the work that you're doing, we're excited to share that through our community and really bring these conversations to life, get real-time feedback, and bring people together and connect in an ongoing way, not just outside of our conference in May. So with that, I know that was very fast, Jane, but there's time for any questions, but please, don't hesitate to reach out with any questions or feedback or ideas really on how we continue to move this work forward.
Yeah, thank you so much, Katie, and just a wealth of resources for our members here. When you do have a chance, if you could send us a link to that platform you mentioned, and we'll get it out to everybody, as well as we can, if it's okay with the presenters, I can turn this PDF, the PowerPoint, into a PDF and also share. Is that okay? Great. So I will do that. I know we're over time. So those that need to leave, please feel free to drop off if you have to go. But I also want to give anyone who has a question, a resource they want to share, something that they want to ask this dream team of leaders on heat safety, please go ahead and raise your hand or put your question in the chat. We'll go till 10:15 if we need to. Any questions? Yeah, Dr. Finley.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I put something in the chat. Question.
Oh. Huh. An example of educating, is it possible to add building consumer knowledge via health literacy as related to heat safety? Are you saying in public education?
Well, in general, for younger people as well as older consumers, because there's a lot that, in the healthcare arena in general, people are needing to be educated on. And again, like I said, an example is they're doing financial literacy for young people these days.
Right.
But in terms of the issue of heat safety, just thinking if health literacy as related to that could be a campaign.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We have started to do heat safety trainings for summer camp providers, early childhood educators, and some with the school district, but it's a good point to work with them on curriculum that they could integrate with the students themselves. We do know that, students playing outside and athletes, they are definitely at risk and need to understand, look out for their bodies as well and for each other. So it's a ongoing body of work that could be done. Katie, did you want to add it?
Yeah, Dr. Finley, it's a very good point, and I think something that's being actively worked on. So, with Greg Hale leading sort of on our heat safety of what we're doing, they have run a program at Disney for many years called Wild About Safety, and it's actually Timon and Pumbaa. And so we're working on sort of reorientating some of that to heat specific, right? So if you look at their Wild About Safety program, how do we take some of that and move it into some more of the relevant things, even Florida specific? And so that's a fun way Disney for a long time has sort of integrated that down into the younger population. But there are current conversations about how do we take sort of Wild About safety and do heat safety and water safety and those sorts of specific safety issues down through our schools and stuff like that, and sort of a fun connecting, engaging way for the youth.
Yeah, okay. And, I'm envisioning that physicians could have, say, a pamphlet for older people in the general area to basically, put it in their mind, as.
Yeah, actually, healthcare professionals are our most trusted messengers out there. And we have had a partnership with Baptist Health and Florida Clinicians for Climate Action in doing outreach to our federally qualified healthcare clinics and to medical offices throughout. They did some research on it, and the education retainment of having just materials in a waiting room was very high, very strong. So it's a good point. Peter Wood, great to see you. And
likewise, thank you.
welcome.
Wonderful presentation, and I have to say I'm very impressed with the level of sophistication and complexity of the programs that have been outlined. Can you share some of your thoughts as to how we can do more, particularly for the smaller companies that don't have this robust infrastructure and bank of smart people who can think about this stuff and get creative and look at the best practices? Can you share what we do with the smaller companies?
Yeah, so I definitely want both Katie and Nelson and Ariana, if you have comments, to speak to this, but we did just launch this small grant program for small businesses that requires them to take some basic health, put in place some basic health safety protocols. That way we're getting the word out as much as possible, and we're going to be testing that, looking ideally for funding going forward on that. But it's a good point. We offer free trainings for small business every summer. But Nelson, you're with the Builders Association, how many members? What are your thoughts? Katie, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. We have to keep thinking creatively of how to reach those folks. One group that's they're not necessarily attached, but indirectly very connected to us is the Associated Builders. That's ABC, right? They deal a lot with general contractors and subcontractors, whereas the Builders Association, it's more developers, right? So most of our members, and we do have a few smaller ones, but most of our members are well structured to where their job sites are already fairly safe from the perspective of having the safety consultants, et cetera. Now, I feel like, maybe providing training that can give continuing credit education towards the licenses of some of these smaller trades, right? Like an electrician, a plumber, a roofer, right? They can do a safety training that does comply with some of the licensing requirements for continued education. Could be a way to get some of those folks in the door. Hitting these subcontractor associations, right? There's roofers associations, as an example. I try to reach out to them, Jane. Remember a couple of years ago when we were going back and forth on discussions with what you do at the county level, and it's just hard, right? Like I couldn't get roofers to show up, and those folks, to a great extent, they're the ones that are in our industry, right? Just like roadway builders, right? They don't have covered areas necessarily in their environment to be able to properly rest, etc. So it was, but I feel like going to these sub-trade associations may be a way, right? Providing incentives through continuing credit, education for attendance to some of these seminars could be a way. We just got to keep thinking, because again, I feel like that's where the challenge really lies, right? The larger sites are easier to get the word out through the folks that are managing, the projects.
Yeah, so Jane, I can just quickly speak to, sort of what we're doing here. So we also run the Florida Chamber Small Business Council. And so that is sort of where we bring a lot of the Florida small businesses together. We have somebody that operates our small business council full time. And they're addressing all issues regarding to small business. So he has certainly been a topic with our small business outreach and policy, specifically on the small business side of what we're doing. So that has been a big part of that work and how we reach the small business, sort of on all things that affect small business. And then we actually work quite a bit with the local chambers. And so we hold monthly federation calls, and we take this down to sort of the community and the local level. Because that is also sort of a lot of where we engage with those smaller organizations down at the community level. And so those are two ways that we're sort of finding success on reaching these small businesses all the way down to sort of the community level.
And Ariana, you're organizing something soon coming up. You want to share that?
Yes, look, and I think that, you know, from our perspective, Costa Farms being a leader in agriculture down here, we take that responsibility seriously. And so we've been working together with Farm Bureau and FNGLA, which are local trade organizations, you know, Miami-Dade chapters of larger Florida chapters, but to share our best practices. And so I know that, well, we are in early May going to be putting together an ag specific roundtable forum, talking about how to beat the heat, sharing our best practices, again, with them on a more practical level. I know, Jane, you're going to be participating with us, and we'll have a few other speakers there. But we do think it's important to just share best practices. And I think I've seen the resources that Florida Chamber has out there on this. The state of Florida has great resources. The Miami-Dade County has great resources. So it really is just about not just sharing our best practices, but also sharing the why behind it's important that we do this, right? The financial implications, and also, you know, it being the right thing to do, and making sure that we share the other resources that are available out there that we ourselves use.
Well, I want to thank you, the panel, and all those that attended today for joining us and for hanging in with us for a little over time. This is a really important topic. Our heat season does start next week. And happy Earth Day all. And Christina, any closing or David, closing comments?
Yeah, no, I think you nailed on the head. I agree with everyone in Peter's assessment. This was an amazing, insightful panel. I walk away hopeful, actually, from all the work that's been put in. I learned a lot about all the technology that goes into this and all the productivity that comes out of it through the agricultural and construction sector. So thanks to Jane, Ariana, Caesar, Nelson, Katie. Yeah, I think obviously we got a long way to go, but like, yeah, I'm also an ex-military guy, Caesar. So I got to tell you, I feel a lot better than when I was back at Fort Bragg in the late 80s and where we've gotten from like heat stroke and technology to now. So thanks everyone for all your time and your expertise and for all the materials you're going to be able to send out to everyone on this call. And thank you, Jane, for leading this panel, and have a great day. Happy Earth Day.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Take care.